Всем привет!
Hi everyone,
Все еще я, Алексей Вишняков.
that's still me, Alexei Vishnyakov, and now I have new guests. Now we're going to speak about the techniques of the hackers and how to detect that in the context of the network traffic.
Mustanger Shapiyev, руководитель
And
группы.
with us is Mustanger Shapiyev, head of the technical testing from Bastion company, Guard, a group of companies, and Kseniya Naumova, specialist from the detection department,
Вредоносного ПО в сетевом трафике.
responsible for malware detection and network traffic.
Ребята, очень рад вас видеть.
Guys, I'm glad to see all of you.
Мега занимательная тема про сетевой
We
трафик.
have a very interesting topic about network traffic and everything related to that.
Сначала я попрошу мне починить кликер,
But
который у меня не работает.
may I get another clicker which doesn't work? And while I'm having my clicker replaced, tell us, Ksenia, about how you analyze the traffic, what is being done for that, just in terms of an intro, so that we could switch from the previous discussion to get some bearing where to move. Well, I think that many of you know the Boyle pyramid. We can make a metaphor like that. So in the very bottom, you can see some reputational lists that would contain compromised objects, hashtags and domain names and APIs. You can make an analysis. We go up, there would be signature analysis. Different signatures being developed, and above, that would be the file analysis. This is a kind of an interaction with different sandboxes where you can send a file for analysis and get information about the file which has been processed. And on top of that pyramid, you can find the behavioral analysis, which includes both the check of anomalies, different script modules, which would embrace the traffic rather than just only the signatures, ML, solutions, etc. So in a nutshell, when we're going to discuss different methods, these are the ones that are most frequently used. Thank you so much. Dear colleagues, dear guys from the technical department, can you give me another clicker, please? It doesn't work. You have 10-15 seconds to do that, and we are moving forward. Mustanger, I have a question to you. When hackers try to hide their actions in the network traffic, what methods that using most frequently? Let us start that with some simple methods, for instance. And I think that you will give us a whole list of the methods that the hackers are using. And Ksenia will tell us how the protection and security tools may help us. Well, speaking about moving from simple to more sophisticated things, let's start with steganography. This is a kind of bit-by-bit shifts, encoding, modification of data, etc. Most of the popular frameworks, C2 frameworks, have on board enormous parameters and settings so that you could set it up easily. It is followed by different encryption, HTTPS encryption, and in general, this is a kind of a tunneling. And out of simple things, but the ones which are most efficient, this is about DNS tunneling, but this is not so much a modification, but rather the use of non-standard protocols. Well, can I give us more detailed information? So let us deep dive into that. Okay. Speaking about steganography, usually that would be XOR, bit-by-bit shift, base 32, base 58 encoding. Also, the hackers love to change the standard words and code base 58. And even there were situations when for encoding whole words, English words would be used, or even there was a Chinese Trojan virus, I don't remember the exact name, but it used the symbols, hieroglyphs, I mean, for encoding or modification of data in order to somehow
Ксения, расскажи, что с этим делать?
entangle that traffic. Ksenia, what we can do about that? How can we approach that? Well, actually, Mustanger named a lot of different methods. I do think that we can elaborate on each of them. To analyze that in more detail, on the slide, I see exactly this stenography, and we can start with that. Proceeding from the simple to more sophisticated one. A good example of stenography is when we see the mismatch of the types. When, for instance, some picture, JPEG picture would be actually requested, and ABS has been sent, and it can be detected by signature analysis, so there is no questioning that. Speaking about more sophisticated cases when, for instance, we have LSB or some other methods, then Mustanger may tell us more how the hackers may hide their maneuvers, what techniques they may use. Not always. Actually, we can succeed in that. During the session, you have to interact with the sandboxes. You have to look at what other actions has been done in terms of the traffic, how interaction has been done. Steganography is being used at the initial stages, and then it is followed by interaction with commands, and it can be detected easier. What steganography is using? For instance, if we speak about the compromising objects, then I can elaborate on that in more detail. So there are certain media files which have been embedded into PNG files, as shown on the slide.
Обнаружение тут, наверное, попроще, потому что идет...
In terms of the detection is done easier there, because you can judge by the behavior, for instance.
Сотен WAV-файлов в минуту.
There would be hundreds of files per minute.
Наверное, это подозрительно все-таки.
And it looks very suspicious.
Медиафайлы, картинки.
So media files, pictures, music, etc.
Что мы делаем в таком случае?
What we're doing about that, and what can be done in terms of the network traffic? Well, the bytes of traffic can be analyzed and to see some anomalies or mismatches. Can be done by means of a signature analysis, by means of a Luma style, for instance. Very often there would be requests for pictures, and inside there would be different payloads. And it can be detected by means of a signature analysis. IOCs can be used everywhere. This is actually a matter of a replenishment of those reputational lists. When we have more sophisticated tools by means of steganography, then we have to judge by the behavioral analysis. For instance, it can be detected by bigrams. That's a very good question. That's a very good trick. Bigrams, these are the rectangles which are being made bit by bit, what follows what, and you can check the internet for that. There are lots of literature about that. In essence, if we look at how the regular JPEG file looks like by means of that bigram, we can see that it has some typical pattern. Bigram, this is an pattern. And if we make a bigram of that JPEG file with payload embedded into that, we will see that the picture is different. This is one of such very cool, very progressive methods of detection. Okay, thank you. Media data. We embed something inside. What can else be done in terms of the stenography? Embedded encoding helps very well. the rules which actually are
пытаются понять, какой тип кодирования используется.
employed to try to understand what type of encoding is being used.
Раскодирование что-то
And
получили,
if
дальше
at the first stage of decoding you get something,
раскручивание не идет, скажем так.
then
В том же сливере можно использовать
the process would be stopped. And in the same sliver, you can set a parameter that the embedded encoding is being used, and embedded encoding along with different simple operations such as XOR, bit by bit, distortion shifts, etc.
тоже может очень сильно
And
синей команде.
it can actually make the life of the blue team more difficult.
Других техник, как раз вот XOR, сдвиги.
XOR and shifts, and again, it can be detected by means of signature analysis.
Длинные и различные тесты байтов, сравнение
And byte tests can be helpful when you compare the consecutive bytes, whether there is any correlation between them. And looking for some anomalies in those bytes, it might be helpful, speaking about the behavioral analysis. And you also spoke about, I forgot the question.
Вложенное то, что...
Embedded, something embedded. Yep.
На самом деле,
You speak about sliver.
рассматривать в целом не только с точки зрения стеганографии, но и других техник.
Which can be considered not only in terms of the stenography, but in terms of some other techniques.
Хорошо.
Okay.
Вскакиваем с темы стеганографии в...
Let's move from stenography to
Давайте поговорим про мимикрию.
mimicry.
У меня представление более общее. Вы можете рассмотреть любые частные случаи, которые...
You can tell us about any frequent cases that are interesting for you, but most importantly, there is illegitimate traffic, and the security officers keep track of that, and hackers
делать свой трафик. Ну, прям похоже
make
на этот самый легитимный.
their own traffic which would mimic the legitimate one, expecting that nothing would trigger an alarm, that everything should go well.
Приемы злоумышленники используют,
What methods are being used by the criminals in order to mimic the legitimate traffic? Very often it happens that, for instance,
Используется стандартная HTTPS с
a
шифрованием.
standard HTTPS would be used with encryption, and
Поле cookie полезную нагрузку.
in cookie field a payload would be embedded, and very often,
В целом должно вызвать подозрение у
all in all,
если
it can raise a suspicion in the blue team when
слишком большой
the cookie is non-standard or if the size is too big.
Или ты имеешь в виду,
Да,
что
но
TCP-шный
если
протокол?
мы говорим про ситуацию, когда условно идет
We speak about the situation when,
трафик, там,
for instance, we're reading the traffic
и так далее.
and there might be some approximation,
Ну, какие-то поля могут быть подозрительно большими, например.
or
Именно тут уже идет...
some fields may be
Понятно, Ксения.
too big.
Да, ты
Okay,
мне уже помогаешь с ответом, да.
you're helping me with answering that. Well, in essence, speak about the most popular frameworks that criminals are using, Sliver and Traitor.
Вставляют как раз таки payload, который передает...
Payload would be embedded in the cookie, not always it would be payload.
системе пользователя, которая получилась достать.
And
Например, у Cobalt это у нас идет...
in Cobalt, for instance, it would be ABS AS64. The blocks are of the same length, and IB64. The length if172 is quite popular, and judging by that length, you can detect.
С этим справляется не только сигнатурный анализ, просто вот если смотреть на, опять же,
But
тенденцию изменения использования...
if we look at the tendency of using the frameworks, actually, those frameworks look very much alike, and the network interaction is the same. I'm speaking about how the criminals are interacting on the internet. Cobalt was easily detected in 2020, and it is very well detected nowadays as well by different security tools from different standpoints, using behavioral pattern and the signature analysis. Well, for instance, we'll speak more about other methods. You can keep track of the tendency to see those spaces when
так сказать, обнаруживать. Вот, ну, тут речь идет как о Cobalt, Так, в принципе, и о сливере, и о других фреймворках. Если
Banks are taking place. Speaking about mimicry,
стали говорить о фреймворках и ушли от
we
этого.
now are speaking about frameworks, but mimicry, that's a very interesting technique, and I met that very frequently within
То есть, когда
TLS mimicry.
пытаются, так сказать, составить свой кастомный
When the criminals try to make their own custom protocol, which would like very much TLS.
Вот эти вот magic байты. И, соответственно, порт 443.
So the port is 443.
Быть очень похожим на TLS, но
and it looks very much like TLS, but if
протоколы, приложения, то они смогут
the
определить,
protocols and applications may identify that this is not original TLS, not all the fields could be replicated and anomalies would be detected.
Например, такое часто встречается, ну и, в принципе, там можно другие малварки назвать.
Я уточню.
And
Под аномалиями понимается не те
anomalies, you
данные в
mean the wrong data in the fields? Yep, wrong data in the fields.
полях. Понял. Хорошо.
Okay.
Если мы немножко усложним эту историю, это вопрос от меня. Да?
If we make that story more sophisticated, this is my question.
Ну, уменьшить, да, все-таки объем не тех данных или объем больших данных.
Well, for instance, if we get some big data, like in your case about cookies, what the criminal would do, it would see how people are communicating to some online shops. You look at the protocol, for instance, you may encrypt that, but this is an HTTP protocol. You can mimic that. There would be some data which have been encoded somehow.
Ну, так вот задумать, да, логику общения с своим управляющим центром, что определенные байты в этих данных.
And certain bytes in those data would be responsible for one command or for certain results, which the machine does, and other letters and code would be responsible for other things.
Когда настолько все правдоподобно выглядит, что и при
Everything looks so true that there is no suspicion regarding that.
подходы помогают или какие-то
Signature approach may be of help or not.
анализа, которые позволяют на ситуацию сбоку
Are there any other types of analysis that can help us to look at the whole situation? You can decode that, it won't decode. Where you mean when, for instance, we have an original TLS, we're speaking about mimicry. Well, we're speaking about HTTP traffic, which has been hidden, and in the post or anywhere else, the unencrypted data would be rendered as is, but they would mean something for the program line. We don't know that actually the criminals managed to modify the code. Well, as I said, you can use certain indicators in order to see that the data is rendered, is sent not where it is intended to. For instance, Cobalt would indicate some legitimate host such as Google or Amazon, but in essence, we are interacting with a total different IP.
Силу, так сказать, поведенческий анализ. Тут можно
But the behavioral analysis can be used.
Ну, я думаю, чуть позже подробнее расскажу про взаимодействие ML-решений, профилирования. То есть, это когда, например, у нас есть
This is when actually we have the client's machine.
Есть какая-то активность. Эта активность, она анализируется
There is some activity there.
Какое-то количество времени, там, недели, месяц, полгода. Тут уже зависит от...
And within
там, того, как, в принципе,
it depends on the time whether this analysis has been done on a weekly basis, and you get some picture, and then you get this IPO in the network, and it does something in essence. It's very difficult for the criminal without for quite a while starting the activity of the host to mimicry that in order to be unnoticeable. And it would be different from the normal actions that the client is doing for quite a while. Okay, that's very convincing. Mustanger, what about you?
Получается, можно использовать
It means that you can use Instead of one lengthy session you can use,
коротких сессий. И это тоже усложняет задачу, вот как Ксения сказала.
and it makes our work more sophisticated.
Практика показывает, что машинному обучению нужны какие-то
Machine learning
нужно какое-то время, чтобы понять.
needs some time in order to understand certain anomalies in that network traffic or behavior on the host.
Да, вот замена одной длительной сессии на множество коротких тоже может
And you can split the session into subsections. So, well, fragmenting, that's a very good topic. And you said ML solutions are not easily detected.
Тем для обсуждения. Вот мне понравилось, я как раз за это зацепилась, потому что...
And I like that very much, because there is something I can tell you retrospectively. That's good when the analysis methods may help us to look that not only in real time, but also retrospectively, to get back to check on a bigger data what is going on and to identify some of the solutions. And that's good when there are some storage systems that are present there
Хорошо.
within certain security tools. Okay, what's change?
Есть такая штука, называется DNS-туннелирование.
There is DNS tunneling. Mustanger, what it is about and how it is being done.
Получается, злоумышленник поднимает свой DNS во внешней сети.
So it means that
К нему от
a criminal raises the DNS and Beacon would send some requests to that, some inquiries,
запросы. На самом деле,
requests for some regular data.
DNS-туннеля примечательно тем,
And
что
the use of DNS tunnel is remarkable in the sense that
все, скажем так, для всего сетевого оборудования и
for the whole network equipment, proxy and other things, this seems to be a legitimate traffic, absolutely harmless. This is how you can miss the attack
Второй момент — это то, что
with the use of the DNS tunnel. Second thing,
в целом вот сам по себе DNS, он...
in essence, DNS, I'm fishing for words.
Ты лучше расскажи несколько частных примеров. Мне кажется, нам...
Tell us more about the practical cases. I think it would be easier for all of us to understand what you tend to tell us, how they are doing that. Technically, that's obvious. So there is a server, it's been deployed, and that's it.
Обмен доменами обычно...
There is an exchange of domains. Usually, an implant would send a request to the DNS server would respond to that. And in the third-tier domain, it would embed some payload.
Таким образом происходит отстук получения.
And this is how actually the results would be obtained, etc.
Понятен. Ксения, что можно делать?
Kseniya, what can be done
Гигантские домены, поддомены и так далее.
when we have such big domains and subdomains?
известных примеров.
One of the latest examples of the attacks
decoy-doc.
that are still quite frequent. So this is a doc type of attack. On the slide, you can see such an example, and Mustanger has said that the criminals may be disguised by the third and fourth tier domains,
Можно отследить с помощью разных
and it can be traced, identified, detected by different methods. If we look at the slide, we would see that payload, which is quite lengthy.
Вот. На самом деле такое обнаруживается и там с помощью сигнатурного анализа. У нас вот эти кусочки передаваемые, они одной длины.
These things that we render, they are of the same length, and we can give an example of the attack, and some would be generated on the basis of the data.
Какие-то содержат в себе данные и
And some would contain the data and would be actually filled with a certain magic bytes,
простыми методами анализа.
and can be detected by different simple analysis methods.
Если уже немножко общее говорить, смотреть на количество этих запросов в течение какого-то времени, например, там количество запросов в
And
минуту.
we can keep track of that, for instance, for quite a lengthy period of time, how many requests are there per minute.
В целом сравнивать с легитимными, смотреть, насколько они
And we can look at that in terms of the legitimacy.
Опять же, это, на мой взгляд, очень несложно задетектировать. Поэтому, да, тут нужно смотреть на
And it's quite easy to detect that. We have to look at the number of requests and when actually it happened, with what periodicity. This is one of the cases of an attack that can be detected very easily. And reputational lists, as I said, this is a question of replenishing those lists. I love more sophisticated analysis methods because you actually can detect something new that has not yet emerged in the blacklists or whitelists, that will not be identified by the signatures, and it helps very well. Well, sounds good. In 2017, when I was a teenager yet, I was doing DNS modeling, and there were no games yet, and studying the data that I detected using my own approaches. With a lot of regret, I saw that a lot of big domains belonged to the cybersecurity companies that can collect telemetry from certain products. So I was disappointed with their approaches, and certainly I got a lot of malware, but I couldn't even imagine that people could let us all down in terms of how they are working.
Есть ли еще какие-то специфичные техники этого самого туннелирования, которые...
Are there any other tunneling techniques that are not domain-driven, but are driven by something else within DNS protocol? Well, in essence, there are other methodologies there as well. For instance, different legitimate services can be used. For instance, Bastion, when you make a tag and you make a link to that tag embedded in the beacon, and beacon with some periodicity would change would check the change in the tag. I thought your question was about not using the tunneling. Well, I find it difficult to answer. Look, I'm not sure whether software developers are doing that, for instance. There might be some requests on the server, and we can send a request, and we get 2 or 3 APs. And for instance, if I try to upload the shellcode, and I can set those bytes of shellcode. Have you ever met anything like that? Or no, I've never met that, but in essence, in many organizations, there is a DNSSEC, and it can divert such attacks. Okay. Anything else, Kseniya? Anything else we can do about that? Well, when we changed our roles, for instance, DNS may send certain commands, but it can be easily detected. This is answering your question. How it all works. So in the very end, the data would be rendered, and usually it would be just a set of bytes, but as far as we have a record there, not always this data would be sent, and not all the DNS records would contain those symbols, and can be done by means of the behavior pattern analysis and the signature analysis. You asked what else besides the DNS analysis can be done. Well, profiling would matter. We have a user who would visit different resources and at different times. That if this source is being visited with a regular interval, well, a user is not doing that. Well, Sliver, in its configuration when making implants, you can set different types of
плюс-минус какая-то дельта в условные 15 секунд.
there would be some delta.
Анализ. Второй вид — это случайная
Second type.
величина в промежутке
This is actually accidental value, minimum and maximum.
Углубляться в примеры.
Well, if we deep dive into the examples, I met Pegasus malware. This is the name of the malware from Booktrap criminal group, and it worked only in the working hours.
Проявлять большую активность, особенно если это какая-нибудь рабочая тачка, то
And if it is an office computer, it would be very difficult to detect that.
выпустить малварь, который будет
It's difficult to make a malware that would work in the working hours, just like a user. For instance, if it is not a targeted attack, for instance, a user is working from 9 to 5, and the malware, for instance, would
это странно, и это обнаружится, потому что
start working 2 o'clock at night. It would look very strange. And sliver, I think, because this is an accidental value, for instance, you can set certain intervals, and that it doesn't work from 7 p.m. through 9 a.m., and it starts working from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., and it depends on the time zones. For instance, it may merge in a totally different time zone. Vladivostok, Kamchatka, and the working hours there would be totally different. I think it could be identified very easily. That's great once you check the time zone, etc. But I have never met that. Can you sum it up, what you have said, just all in all?
И каких-то периодичностей.
Once we speak about some periodicity in terms of the network communication, what the protection and security tools are going to do in order to fix it? What we rely on? Maybe 1, 2, 3 some approaches, the ways to address that. Well, let me tell you two most important ones. Signature analysis would not be appropriate there. As I said, the profiling would be more appropriate. Or ML solution, which is profile-based. That's a very good method. But it may miss the defense.
Это различные дополнительные
And another method is some script models.
Если объяснять, то это я вроде бы до этого уже немножко затрагивала.
I think that I touched upon that a little bit. So it's kind of a module which is written on some script language, which has more functionality. Unlike just simple signature rules, so it can check different sessions, check the availability of something, check the bytes, check the lengths, and analyze that. So this is a more profound analysis. I think that this is a very good example of the modules. I know such modules that can detect a sliver and cobalt and portrait thanks to the session analysis. Analysis of those responses. Well, but still, there is a question. Do we want an ML solution in a script language? Well, first of all, this is an ML solution with profiling. This is number one. And second, this is a script module, which does what? Which, as I said, would look at the number of sessions, the intervals between them.
На то, что позволяет его функционал.
Я понял.
It depends on the functionality.
Да. То есть я говорю, это как
Okay.
анализ, только во много-много раз.
This is just like signature analysis, but it can enable analysis of the sessions, not in some brief period of time, but
Отлично.
in a longer period of time. Okay?
Другая история.
Another story.
Бытует мнение, что вот такие вот средства анализа испытывают сложность.
So there is an opinion that such security tools find it difficult to detect the malware when big data is being rendered, being sent through TCP. If we send
что-то больших размеров,
big size files,
Мустангер, что вообще может предпринять атакующий, если
what hacker may do if it thinks about how to bypass such an analyzer?
Это раздувание, ну, объема
Well,
данных. Второй
first
момент
of all,
это
this is about
Bastion
increasing the size of the data. And secondly, if the criminal knows what information security system is targeting that,
у которого будет огромное количество положительных срабатываний регулярных выражений, что
which would actually have some number of positive regular expressions, which may result in a failure of the information security system. Okay. Swollen data.
Пусть мы раздули данные там, да, до 50 мегабайт, и где-нибудь в конце...
For instance, if the size is about 50 megabyte and end of the line we write some request. And on the second case,
регулярные выражения вызывают срабатывание огромного количества
regular expressions would
срабатывания на какой-то регулярный.
entail some positive response to the regular expressions. So we put some dummies,
Ресурсоемких.
some dummy resource-intensive requests, and this is what we're going to do. And Kseniya, what we
порядке. Сначала расскажу про
do to fix it.
то, как справляться с регуляркой.
Let me take a
потому что при регулярке, вот если говорить,
in reverse mode. I will start with the regular expressions, and then would end up with the DDoS attacks. I cannot say that this was a rare case. There were cases when really
каком-то правиле действительно содержится много
signature rule would contain a lot of regular expressions, which are resource intensive.
набрать байтики, сделать, прогнать трафик, то
And if you collect more bytes, really, you would see the open source solution that would get stuck.
эффективное правило, в которых будет минимальное
An efficient rule has to be made with a minimum number of regular expressions, and these regular expressions would be really good. They would be checked.
на каком трафике срабатывает. Ну и,
And
конечно, стоит говорить о том, что в продуктах, особенно там каких-то коммерческих,
it's worth saying
проверять и там тестировать
that you have to check the rules and cover all the vulnerabilities, even in the open source solutions.
закрываются уязвимости, в том числе связанные с
Vulnerabilities would be fixed, even the ones which are related to bypassing the signature rules. When trash data is being used in order to jam the traffic. And once we're speaking about bypassing signature, there are different bypass contests, and that's great. It helps the specialists to try how they can bypass the security tools, and others may understand what could be changed in order to fix that problem. A piece of advice is that open source solutions, especially the rules, can contain that, and you have to be cautious once you want to use that in your own products.
С длинными данными.
What about big data or lengthy data? Well, speaking about lengthy data or big size data when a lot of bytes have been sent. Again, open source solutions have some limitation in terms of the number of bytes that are checked within a session. That's true. And in that case, that's a very good way to bypass that. But the criminals, where the information security systems, the commercial ones, try to address that problem by means of analyzing all those bytes, because that would be a mistake not to analyze everything. You can actually break that into different sessions and retain the traffic in order to analyze that retrospectively. Speaking about DDoS,
нужно снимать нагрузку системы, это уже все-таки больше задача разработчиков.
And this is up to the developers to do that.
О том, чтобы эффективно взаимодействовать в команде экспертизы, команде разработки. и делать решение таким, чтобы такой DDoS можно было...
You have to make sure that such DDoS is bypassed. Okay, you are a sly lady. On the one hand, we have to check everything. If we cannot do that instantaneously, we have put that off for the future. And if not, then we shift the responsibility to someone else. Well, this is not shifting the responsibility, but